Lady Vanishes from 1938, directed, of course, by Alfred Hitchcock, starring Margaret Lockwood, Michael Redgrave, Paul Lucas. Quick logline on the movie: while traveling in continental Europe, a rich young playgirl realizes that an elderly lady seems to have disappeared from the train. So I had to include something from his British period before he kind of came to Hollywood, and there's so many gems in that era as well. Like I love the Marlena Dietrich one, Stage Door, and Sabotage, and
Hmm.
you know,
39
39
Steps. That's one
Steps,
of my
and
favorites. Yeah. Foreign
exactly.
Correspondent, I almost put
Foreign
on here too.
Correspondent.
That's
I
one of my favorite
almost
movies of all time.
put
Yeah.
that somewhere as well, but
Yeah.
I guess that wouldn't really be a wild card because that really falls into all of his
I,
stuff. But
yeah. Yeah.
this one, I think he this is as close as Hitchcock comes to like a comedic farce kind of a movie. Like the
Hmm.
first like 30 minutes of the movie when they're in the ski lodge trap, like it's like a full-on comedy movie. There are
Oh,
gags
yeah.
in there, and stuff with the staff and the girls and their luggage that's coming in and the maid, and it's like quite charming and funny, and not in like a dark twisted way, but it's just plain life funny,
Yeah. Yeah.
and you sort of are unclear of what's even happening, for a while, until when the plot starts to kind of unroll of the vanishing of this lady. And again, if Hitchcock made this movie or remade this movie, I guess in the 60s, I think it'll be a much darker movie for sure.
Mm.
But this
Hmm.
just stands out to me because it's such a light and breezy movie. The performances are great. And so yeah, it's kind of like a comedic caper of sorts. Now it's of course it's Hitchcock, so there's more underneath the layers, as always, where you can think more. But I think to me, this is a wild card because it just stands on itself as like a comedic farce, like I said. So that's why I put this as my wild card. Had you watched this movie before?
Yeah. So I had seen this before. I saw this during my Hitchcock class. So I had actually
Mm.
not been exposed to the British period that you mentioned until taking the class. I'd only seen Hitch's American films, and not to group them kind of all together, but I did feel that there this fun tone is through a lot
Mm-hmm.
of them that is sometimes not as those other movies when he made in the States not necessarily have a lot of the humor. And I think that is it, and this movie especially really works. So there's some of them don't. The Trouble with
Mm-hmm.
Harry is more of an outright comedy. The movie is not good really at all. But this sense of fun, especially like you said in the first act of the movie, where it just feels like just the almost like a lead up to like a screwball comedy where you meet all the different
Mm-hmm.
people and they're going to be stuck on a train now. Oh, this is going to be really fun. And like what hijinks are going to happen. And if it's Hitchcock, so of course the hijinks is a disappearance, potential murder of this woman. And then what's going on there. But what makes this movie work is not only Hitchcock, I do think is very good at humor. Honestly, like maybe not broad comedy per se, but
Right.
his films do have a very usually darkly comedic tone. I mean, I even remember as a kid watching the Hitchcock TV series when he would come on and do his little bits. They were always comedy bits and really dark, twisted, kind of like dark humor. But this movie isn't necessarily that either. It's not dark, but the comedy really works because of the characters. The characters are really fun. I really love like those two like foppish English guys that are, obsessed with cricket and they're trying to go to the show. They're cool. Like the main characters are fun and interesting. Even the old lady who goes missing, like in the beginning, you're like, oh, she's gonna play some like goofy role of being some old lady. But then, the plot thickens as you say, and then it turns into a sort of more of a suspense mystery on the train, like a confined space movie. What's going on, and are
Right.
pe are people being gaslit? And this is an example where the audience doesn't really know
Mm-hmm.
actually at all. But yeah, I would say the old lady's not is maybe you could say that she's a MacGuffin kind of, or this is more of just a straightforward mystery movie that still really works.
Yeah.
You do care about the plot and it's a lot simpler to follow, especially once you kind of realize what's going on. But I think it's a fun movie and nice to bring it into the conversation too. And there's some other things that I learned in the class that was interesting too
Hmm.
that I can get into if we kind of as we dive more into the film, which is another sort of take on what this film's trying to say that I definitely wouldn't have picked up on if I hadn't been taught that. And
Hmm.
then now every time I go back and watch it, that's all that I can see in this
Oh,
movie.
I'm very curious to hear. On the mystery part, I agree. Like it's straightforward. However, I always do forget about what happened. I know she vanishes, but
Oh,
I
like
always
the
forget what
mechanics of
happened.
how it, yeah, like
Yeah.
where she's being hidden and who all the players are. Right.
Yeah,
That's true, actually. It's hard to, I can't recall it right now. And I just saw the movie
no,
last week.
exactly. And that's sort of his genius, right? That you're always, kind of along for the ride. Curious, what was the theory you heard?
Oh, so that this movie was, I can't remember the exact year, but it was late 30s. It was made. And this was during the rise of Nazi Germany, but before like England was still trying to appease Hitler and not get into go into the Europe and try to stop what Hitler was doing, basically spreading the Nazi Empire throughout Europe, and that the lady, quote unquote, in the movie it represents England. Like she's very much like a Queen
Oh,
Victoria type character who vanishes. Like we need England. Europe needs England. Like what's going on? Like why can't you come and help save us from the fascists? The villains in this movie are very like Nazi coded and
mm-hmm.
German coded. There's one character too in the movie that is always sort of like the coward. He's like, no, we can negotiate with these guys. We can negotiate.
Right.
And then the second that he goes out and tries to negotiate with the bad guys, he immediately gets killed. And at the
Mm,
time, there was this big appeasement movement of all these people saying like, well, we can just negotiate with Hitler. It's okay. Well, I don't want to go to war again. We just had World War One. Let's just try to
right.
work something out. And this movie is basically saying, you're going to get killed. You can't negotiate with these guys. These are the bad guys. We have to find, Lady Britain and actually go and try to save Europe. So this, because of this time, there's these arguments kind of going back and forth, I guess, in Britain of like, how do we want to get involved? In the States too, but in Britain, it was a lot more prescient because the Nazis are like right across the channel as opposed to across the
Mhm.
ocean. So every time I see this movie now, I try to like think, okay, what is this character must represent this part of
Mm,
the argument. Bad guys definitely appear as Nazis. Like now I can't
mm,
unsee it. So that they were teaching us that at the class, and that's like now all that I view this movie at, which is it's like a political film in a way, which
right.
Hitch doesn't really tend to do. But he was someone who definitely was pro stopping Hitler. And this movie is sort of saying that without kind of outright coming out and saying it, but the subtext is there to what he's trying to do with this movie.
Checks out. I don't know how much he was thinking about it versus this is just theories that
Yeah,
have been, built over time,
right.
but it does check out and probably it was on his mind.
Absolutely. Yeah. And you
Yeah.
put it into your art, right? You want to make some sort of statement, but he also has to entertain. So there's like an entertaining story around this, but the story has a message. But instead of being about love or all the things we're talking about,
Yeah.
it's like, hey guys, we got to go out there and get the Germans. They're not going to stop until they
Yeah.
take over the world.
Last thing I want to say, which is very true for a lot of the British period movies, that they always begin in like this miniature recreation of the actual
Yes.
set. I love that
Yes.
so much.
Yes.
And this one, it's sort of the whole train station and the ski lodge and everything. And I mean, I want all of those for my collection. Not that I have a collection of miniatures, but that would be so amazing. I've always loved like miniatures that are drawn or recreated to that level of detail, and it's just so great. I mean, and it. I mean, I don't know. At that point, were they really trying to make this come off as like a real thing? Probably that's the best thing they had. I mean,
Hmm.
at this point, you obviously know it's not, but it adds just so much charm. And it's almost like, the opening of a book. Like the book
Hmm.
has like an illustration of sorts of what's to come. That's how I take these now. And I love that so much.
Yeah, me too. And actually, that's something we haven't mentioned at all throughout this conversation yet is just Hitchcock pushing the boundaries of like visual effects in movies.
Right.
Like, there's so many of his movies had incredible special effects sequences, and I count this as sort of this is a special effect in a
Yeah.
sense. The model and this tracking shot through the model, and yeah, I wonder how much of it he knew. This is supposed to look a little bit quaint, maybe to set the tone of the movie, like again,
Mm,
you said opening a pop-up book or something, a little storybook beginning to this little Europe before the Nazis kind of thing.
hmm.
I don't know if that was how much of that was intentional, but definitely like it struck me on this rewatch too. It's like, oh yeah, these model shots are amazing. And then remembering, oh yeah, Hitchcock is a special effects director. He's like a Jim Cameron, but
Right.
back then, pushing the boundaries of effects for story purposes, but not letting the effects take over what the story is. But I mean, so many of these effects in these movies and these action sequences were just revolutionary at the time and must have blown people away, just like going to Pandora or the Death Star trench run in Star Wars or something that big because they hadn't seen it before. And that's just awesome. So I'm glad you brought that up because that definitely is something that struck me, especially on this watch too. It's like, oh, this is so cute. What a great, I'm sort of in the right mood for what this movie has, at
Yeah.
least in the
It's very
beginning.
cozy because of that,
Cozy.
I
Yeah, that's
think.
a great, yeah. Miniatures are cozy. I don't know
Yeah.
why.
Yeah. All right. Yeah. Cozy and Hitchcock are not two words that you would think of, hence the wild card.
Yeah. Hi there, it's Alex. If you like the review and discussion Karan and I just had, make sure you subscribe to our channel, Movies That Shaped Us, to get full episodes. Every other Wednesday, Karan and I review a new release and then discuss 6 other movies made by that film's actor or director and how they shaped us. Subscribe right now or follow our podcast on Spotify or Apple Podcasts via the link in the description below. Hope you join us for the journey.